museum. Looks great, doesn't it? This game gives Vincent Dutray's artwork a kind of prime estate. Well, sort of, but we'll come back to that. Vincent Dutray must be one of the most prolific artists in the board game world today. Unless, of course, he is a team, and rather than one man, he is a team of trained octopuses putting out 8 drawings per hour each. Museum is obstinately a set collection game. Now, this is the Kickstarter version that was kindly given to me by Holy Grail Games to review, and that means there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm not really sure what is for. I think these are your little kind of backrooms of your museums. There's some rules with some of the extra cards on, but again, these Kickstarter exclusives rules don't have any of the pictures. So for me, as someone who didn't back the Kickstarter and just picked this up, there was a little bit of confusion with the components. So there's some pictured in the main rules, but it was still perhaps a little bit harder than it should have been to work out what was what. You get all sorts of extra boards and sideboards. But the main thrust of this game is collecting sets into your individual museum, helpfully drawn onto one of those boards. They are double-sided with a standard side that everyone has the same kind of ultimate collection shape. And then on the back they have a different one. This one a rather boring straight line. But if we went across to the green one, for example, as we want to do, we can see the standard shape and then the kind of extended U shape. So this gives everyone a bit of a symmetricity difference. These are a little bit disappointing in terms of material, but also because when you play these back side of the base side of them, they do that. They become a tent, and you kind of don't want to fold them back the other way because of the material. There is a main board which is overly long because all it is doing is containing 2 cards from each continent, which is America Pacific, Europe, Africa, Middle East and Asia, and they're going to be where you draft the cards from. Sometimes you'll have less, sometimes you'll have more, but there you go. In the Kickstarter version you get these beautiful busts, but unless you're going to paint them, it can be easy to forget which one represents you. This big one is the first player marker, but the various stuff, a samurai, and they're just all grey, and though they're different items, and like you don't forget Monopoly, in this game, in a modern board game, it just felt a little bit strange why they didn't have coloured bases or the ability to put coloured bases on them. The game is basically a card game. You're going to be collecting items from the different regions of the world and putting them into your museum. And there's quite a clever little system, although we've seen it in other games, where each card has a value, and that value is between 1 and 5. So if I wanted to put a 4 into my museum, I'd have to play cards valuing at least 4 into my cupboard. And this is one of the bits of the game that could have worked really well, but given the overall style of the game and the overall how the game works, doesn't quite work for me. So I will put 2 in here. The catch is now that this is somewhere where other players can raid. Say I put a piece in that they really need, they can take that. So if it's a 2, they will need to pay at least 2 into my cupboard, and then they can take that and play that to their board. So you can play stuff to your board from your cupboard, from other people's cupboards, from your hand. And you're trying to build up your museum to get as many pieces in it as possible, except you're not, because where you place them really doesn't matter, because you can rearrange them at any time. And in fact, at the end of the game, you are told to spend some time rearranging this museum that you have created. And this is another of museums' problems. Because you are collecting two different types of sets, the colour or region that they are from, and then the relic on the top. So we have a book here, we have a pillar here, and you can score cards in both those sets as long as they touch each other orthogonally. Now, this might create a pleasing puzzle in other games, for you to do, but because you have such freedom that you can move them anytime, it becomes a bit pointless. It's kind of like playing a roll and write, where you roll all the dice you're going to roll over the whole game, note down what they are, and then place them perfectly on the board. I played Railroad Ink the other day, and it would have been like doing that, rolling all the dice, not bothering drawing any. Right, I've got that many of that dice, that many of that dice, and then just trying to game out the perfect system to get the most points, which is fine, but it just makes the game take longer than it should and drag. And considering you have to pay for everything by putting things into your cupboard, yet you can move your exhibits around willy-nilly for no cost at all, it just seems a bit against the theme. The other thing with the theme is you're putting these beautiful exhibits into your museum and then covering up the gorgeous artwork. Each of these cards is uniquely illustrated by the team of octopus called Vincent Dutray, and yet as soon as they go into your museum, you're covering them up apart from the front row of any of your columns. And again, this seems to go against the theme and really jive against the theme. The other thing is that for a set collection game that is ultimately incredibly simple, there are only two types of sets you can collect. There are no powers on the cards. The writing on them is thematic. There are occasionally skull cards which do give you powers, but they're few and far between, and generally they're powers like add this to any set you want. Because it's such a basic set collection game, it just shouldn't take so long. One of the people I played this game with said it took an hour and a half, but it felt like it took 3 hours. No one wants to say that about a game, especially when if you're looking at set collection games, you could play the new game Hats from Thundergriff game, which is a delicious, small, but clever and thinky set collection game that you can play in 15 minutes. So you could play that a lot of times in the time it takes to play a game of this. The cupboard itself, this seems like a great system, the idea that you have a cupboard that other people can raid from. Yet in practice it's just something else to look at, and as this becomes filled up, as people pay to put things into their museum, it becomes harder and harder to look at other people's cupboards because there's just so much in them. Later in the game, cards from certain countries will be worth minus points at the end. So you might think, brilliant, this is a chance to ditch them with all those minus point ones from my hand. Yet it becomes more effort than it's worth to really do that. And this is kind of a sub part of the game, not the main part of the game. I would love to see this cupboard system changed or become the main part of the game over the set collection. Something to do with maybe a shared cupboard that has a limited amount of space, so one gets pushed out every time you put one in, so you've got to act on it quick and there's only one place to look at, or that is the only place you can get cards from after a certain amount of time. You can only get them from the other cupboards because sites have closed down. There's a whole undercurrent in this game of people becoming annoyed that you're kind of raiding these sites and not putting these items on display, that they're going into the cupboards. Well, have them shut down the sites, so the only place you can get goods from a certain country is from the cupboards. As it is, it just feels half-baked. And that is one of the characteristics of the whole game for me. The other thing that I think this game struggles with is just being overly generous to the players. The fact that cards can score in one or two sets just gives you too much to think about. There's no crunchy decision of, oh, shall I put this here and get 16 points for this set, or is it better to use it in this set and try and get some more money? No, what you want to do is try and place it somewhere where you can get it in both sets, and that's often easier said than done. In fact, because you get to shuffle all your cards up at the end and then put them in however you want with no penalty at all or no payment to be made, it really doesn't matter. You may as well collect all your cards on the side and wait till the end to see what you have. I think you can tell I was a little bit disappointed in Museum. I wish the theme had been woven through more convincingly and consistently, or they had just gone for a basic set collection game. I wish that decisions meant more. I wish that if I put this piece here in the museum, then it was stuck there unless I paid to move it. I wish that my decisions to go to someone else's cupboard or to go to the middle of the map, maybe that should have been a choice. You either take from the middle or someone else's cupboard because they're not using it. I wish they meant more in the game. There's an interesting scoring system as well. The game ends once someone gets past 50. In practice, this sounds like a great idea. Do you hold on to get more points because once you get past 50, everyone else is going to take their go and try and get further past you? In reality, what it means is as soon as someone gets around this corner of the board, gameplay slows down again as people try to maximise their points before they get past 50 so that on their last go they can do as much as possible and jump past the opposition. So Museum is a set collection game that is far too basic for the amount of time that it takes, that has half-baked ideas that could have been something really special at the core of it, and just gives me a feeling of I could have played a smaller, better game with less setup, less components that actually are disappointing, and had more fun 6 times over. Intimidation factor for Museum is higher than it should be for what is essentially a basic set collection game. Look, this is set collection, vanilla set collection at that. There is no specialness to the sets you're collecting. It's colours and symbols, 2 things. And you're trying to get as many of those as possible, and there are some gold cards, but they're still based on the same things. They give you the points for the same sort of collections. There's no powers like in Sushi Go, where if you collect this, it does this, or it scores differently, or adds a bit of interest. Again, a smaller game that plays much quicker, and yet has a lower intimidation factor. So for the level of gameplay, the intimidation factor is too high in terms of clunkiness and in terms of length of game. Rules. The rules weren't the best. Again, I've got to judge this as the gameplay presents itself, and the gameplay presents itself as a very, very simple game. So rules don't get a pass either. Will I be keeping it in my collection? Absolutely not. The set collection gameplay warrants a box and a game a quarter of this size, and yet games a quarter of this size do both set collection and gameplay better. So I won't be keeping it in my collection, and the only people I'd be recommending it to are people who really, really love their set collection games and perhaps will only play with 2 players to get there quicker and to make more of the cupboard system. It's a real shame that Museum doesn't tick more boxes, that it couldn't have been something like a more thinky, more gamery set collection game, but it just never gets beyond the basic premise of set collection in a way that it elevates it beyond any of those smaller games. So I won't be recommending Museum to anyone other than set collection fanatics. And also, if I never played it again, I honestly wouldn't be that bothered. Would I jump in on a game? After my first game, I thought I might, but then as I thought about it and played it more, and the flaws just became more and more obvious and frustrating, and crucially, the length of time to play the game with more than 2 players, I wouldn't play it again. So unfortunately, this is one of my most negative reviews. Now, it has to be said that there are people who absolutely love Museum. There are plenty of people in the biggest UK gaming group who love this game, and I will be searching for a review of this game that where the people like it more, and I'll be putting links to those in the description of this video, just so you can get the opinion of someone who likes this game. I'm not going to bang on about it anymore because I don't need to. Thanks very much for watching Board Deck and Dice. We will see you next time.